If you need to cut onions, make sure you're doing it in a really inefficient way. Think of a less efficient way and do it that way. Welcome to 86, where I help line cooks and chefs with soft skills, and I also have some recipe content, a little bit of stuff for home cooks as well. So if you're new, hi, welcome. How's it going? I hope you're having a great day. While there are plenty of cooks that strive to get better and watch my content to get better, there are cooks that never want to get better in the industry. They never want to grow in the kitchen and improve their skills. So what I wanted to do today is offer 25 tips to make sure that you never get better as a line cook. So the first tip to make sure that you never grow as a line cook is to always be late. Showing up late shows that you have a lack of commitment for the job, and who really needs to be committed to a job, right? The second tip, even if you have absolutely no culinary skills at all, make sure that the people training you know that you already know how to do everything, even if you don't. It is extremely important to be arrogant and late in the kitchen. Number 3 is ignore instructions. Any handbooks you're given, do not read them. Any training you're offered, do not take it. Anytime somebody tells you anything, completely forget. It might even be good to just keep headphones on while they're talking to you. That way you know that you will not pay attention to anything they're saying. Number 4 is never improve your knife skills. All of your cuts are as weird and awkward as possible. And when you don't improve your knife skills, it will make sure that it takes like the maximum amount of time to do everything. So that way you don't have to do as much, right? Because if you don't know how to cut food, then you only you have a task, a prep task, and it might take you like 4 hours to get that task done when it takes somebody else like half that time, right? Tip number 5 is be messy and disorganized. So there is the term in the industry called mise en place. You've heard me say this several times if you've been following the channel for a while, and that is to make sure you get everything together. Well, you don't want to do that. Okay, what you want to do is if you have to do a specific prep item or an ingredient for the recipe, go to the dry storage and get like the seasoning and then come back and set it down and just measure out all the seasoning. And then go grab the onions and just do the onions and grab each piece individually. That means that will also add to the time it takes you to get the task done. So if you have bad knife skills and it already takes you a long time to cut, and you're only doing one thing at a time really slowly, and you're constantly looking for things because they're disorganized, it'll make sure that you spend the maximum amount of time doing the least amount of work. Tip number 6 is never taste your food. Who has time for that? And besides, the more you eat, the more calories you're eating, right? So it's actually unhealthy. So if you think about it, it's better if you're making something to never taste it at all. Just don't taste it. If something comes back, it's probably the customer's fault, right? It's not your fault that you didn't taste it. It's their fault, and they shouldn't be coming here. Tip number 7, and this kind of goes with being disorganized, make sure that you're working really messy. Like if you're on saute, because I mentioned saute a lot in the previous video, keep all of the dirty pans on the saute station and make it really awkward and hard to like make anything. When you reach in to the cold bar, that you are like grabbing things and like sprinkling, like if the cheese is up here, you grab the cheese and make sure some of it gets like sprinkled into the other stuff. That's always the best part when you're working in food service, is being able to like just have all of the ingredients disgusting and mixed together, and then when you throw them in the pan, there's like bits of like potato and cheese and stuff, and the dish doesn't have any of that in there. Absolutely be as messy as possible on the cook line. Bonus points if you have a bunch of dirty, nasty towels. That really helps. Number 8, always assume you're going to have a short shift and you're going to get out exactly when the time says you're going to get out. So if you're scheduled like so what you do is you first don't read the schedule, because if you read the schedule, then you won't be able to assume that you're not working very much. Just come in, don't read the schedule, and just keep in mind that you're only going to be there for 5 hours and you're going to be leaving just before it gets like really, really busy. In addition to that, you'll probably take extra smoke breaks during this time. And then when you try to leave and somebody tries to stop you, it's their fault. I want you to be very vocal about how it's BS and it's unconstitutional for you to have to work more than 5 hours in a shift. Threaten to quit too. That's important. So you come in, Assume you're working 5 hours. Don't look at the schedule. Act like you're going to leave and start getting ready to leave and stuff. And then if you get stopped, passive aggressiveness. Make sure that you're extremely passive aggressive about it as well. Like, stay for the rest of your shift, but then like slam things in the dish pit and just kind of be a jerk, right? That is a really good way to never grow as a line cook. Number 9, never ask questions. It is the trainer's responsibility to make sure that they're telling you everything that you're not listening to because you have headphones in. So when you don't know how to do something, like if you have to make like, say 50 pounds of spinach dip, don't bother asking anybody if you've never made it before. Just assume that you know what you're doing and just do it, right? Like, you may not even need the recipe. Just like, oh, I know it's got spinach in it, and just like make it however you want. Really, that's better for everybody because you're just wasting their time anyway. So don't ask them questions. If you ever do something wrong, just remember it's never your fault. Tip number 10 is blame everybody else for any mistakes that you make. It's really the trainer's fault for not training you properly. It's the customer's fault for the food tasting bad. It's the shift before you's fault that your station isn't ready or not clean, right? That way you can get away with some of these other tips, right? Because if you work messy and you have crap everywhere, you can blame it on, well, it's not your fault because the shift was really busy, so you don't need to clean. And you're out of product because the previous shift didn't stock the line. So why should you need to stock the line? It's their responsibility to make sure the line is stocked. So if you're out of ingredients and you're behind on tickets, it's really somebody else's fault. Just keep that in mind when you're on the line. Tip number 11 for not growing as a line cook is make sure that you're very impatient about everything as well. So when it starts getting busy, you want the rush to be over immediately. And then that passive aggressive thing from your short shift, make sure you're doing some of that too. Like you're slamming your pans on saute and like aggressively grabbing bags and like shaking the pasta into the pasta water. Like make sure you're doing stuff like that because things are not happening at the pace that you want them to. And when you do that, it actually makes time go by faster. So the more passive aggressive you are about being impatient about your shift ending, the faster time will actually go. Number 12, anytime there's a high pressure situation, panic as much as possible. Panicking is the absolute best thing you can do on the cook line. In any situation where there's a lot of stress, just freak the fuck out. Like completely lose it. That way other people will jump in and do your job for you and you won't have to do as much work. You know, then you can do whatever you want. You can go out for a smoke break. Tip number 13, disrespect the food. If you have like a lobster, like a really nice lobster, just totally mutilate it, right? Like just don't even try. If you get a beef tenderloin and you don't know how to trim it, like I said, you're not going to want to ask anybody, right? Don't ask if you don't know how to trim the beef tenderloin. Just hack it to pieces, right? I mean, it doesn't matter anyway. It's not yours. You didn't pay for it. So why bother? Tip number 14 is ignore everybody. So more than just keeping your headphones in when people are trying to give you advice, like anytime a ticket gets called out, never respond heard, never say that, never even communicate. Just pretend you didn't hear anything. If you're running low on product, don't say anything. Don't say anything to anybody. Just let the product run out and then you can 86 it, right? If somebody comes to you with feedback, ignore it. Just everything. So tip number 15 is be rigid. Be as rigid as possible. You want to stick to doing things the exact same way that you've always done them. So if somebody gives you advice, just assume they're wrong and just keep doing it the way you're doing it. It's been working so far. Tip number 16, communicate poorly. So if you're not going to ignore people, when you do respond, give like mumbling answers and make it really hard to understand, and make sure you are not using a loud voice when you're on the line. If you respond loudly in the kitchen, it might distract somebody. So you're better off just mumbling. It's actually, the cool thing about doing it this way is miscommunication actually makes the night more exciting, right? It adds like a level of flair to the night. Tip number 17, make sure that you buy the worst quality everything. Don't even use the house knives. Go to Walmart and get those ones where it's like a whole block of like 100 knives for like $10. You know, the really crappy plastic ones. use those knives. Don't sharpen them. Any other equipment you have, downgrade. Make sure you get the worst quality of all of your equipment. And, you may even want to get rid of some. Tip number 18 is always ignore food safety. Like, if you have gloves on and you're handling chicken, it's totally fine to just take your gloved hands and go and touch everything. Like, open the drawers with your chicken hands, open the walk-in door, do the raw chicken, throw it on the flat top, and then immediately go and grab cheese, all of that kind of stuff. When you're putting food away, it's totally fine to put the raw chicken up above the cooked stuff. It's not going to drip on there anyway. People are just panicking over nothing. Some crap happened back in '94 and some people died, and now everybody's always freaking out about food safety, but it's not really that big of a deal. It doesn't matter. There's no reason why, if chicken is like 145 instead of 165, there's no reason why you can't just send it out. Like, they're not going to notice anyway. And they probably want that anyway because it's juicier. So just any food safety regulations, just always ignore them. Tip number 19, neglect your health, both physical and mental. If you find that your feet are starting to get hurt from your shoes, just ignore it. Just pretend it's not happening. If you feel yourself getting burnt out in the industry, just keep doing it. Just keep going in and clocking in, right? You're just being a wuss. Just stick with it. Keep doing the same thing that you're doing. It's never going to get any better anyway. You may as well just always neglect your mental and physical health. Make sure you pick up like a habit, like a bad habit, like a smoking or a drinking habit. That's usually pretty good too, just to kind of like add on to it. Tip number 20, do everything yourself. And if you see anybody struggling, or if you notice that somebody needs help, like if they need to get something from an area and you're going into that area, don't get it. They can do it themselves. They're just going to start relying on you for things. Just don't ever help anybody. And if you're struggling with something, like if there's something really heavy and it's hard to lift, just try to lift it anyway, and then if you can't lift it, just leave it on the floor. Like, somebody else will get it. Tip 21, be extremely sensitive. You want to have super thin skin. No matter what anybody says, no matter how gentle of a criticism it is, make sure they know that it hurt your feelings. And then if make sure you block them on Facebook. Don't ever talk to them again, right? You shouldn't be talking to anybody anyway. You should be ignoring them, right? Because we're talking about these tips, right? You shouldn't be listening to them. But if they do say something, no matter how minor it is, you should just be offended by it. And if you're in a place that has HR, go to HR as much as possible. Just everything, every single thing that you can think of, go to HR about it. Doesn't matter. Tip number 22 is stay indifferent. If we had a bad night, rush was awful, you didn't do very good, your station's dirty, who cares? Just go home. Just clock out. Who cares? It's not a big deal. Like, you got games to play, you got beer to drink, you got stuff to do. There's no point in reflecting on mistakes you've made or things that have happened throughout the night that could have been done better. It's just a waste of time. Tip number 23 is have poor time management. So this one is kind of ties in with those other ones about being disorganized and not doing your mise en place and all of those other ones. That will kind of help you have that bad time management, because what we're trying to do is fit the least amount of work into the largest amount of time. And the best way to do that is figure out any way that makes the job take longer. Instead of cutting something on the slicer, like cut it by hand. If you need to cut onions, make sure you're doing it in a really inefficient way. Like, just whatever you're currently doing, just think of a less efficient way and do it that way. Other ways you can manage your time poorly is when you are walking to and from certain areas, take a little bit longer. Don't pick up the pace. Don't walk fast at all. Take extra bathroom breaks. And when you're in the bathroom, make sure that you're staying on TikTok like longer. Like, you want your legs to start feeling numb, and that's a good indication that it's probably time to get up at that point, because you don't want to lose circulation in your legs and get hemorrhoids and stuff. Or maybe you do. Maybe you're into that. I don't know. I'm not going to judge. But yeah, just take extra bathroom breaks, take extra smoke breaks, and just be really inefficient with your time while you're there. Try to leave early too. That's kind of a bonus one. Tip number 24, if you're doing these other tips, this one will kind of be that like extra one that you don't actually have to work extra hard for. And that is disrespecting your superiors. scoff at things they say, if you're ignoring their advice, if you're not listening, if you're not taking criticism, if you're coming in late, you're disrespecting your superiors. So you're actually fulfilling this tip by doing those other things. But any time that you can roll your eyes, or if you're gonna go out for a smoke break and they say they need you on the line, just go anyway. Ignore them as much as possible. And when you do talk to them, kind of give them a little bit of an attitude, but in a subtle way. So then when they call you out on it, you can just say that you weren't having an attitude, right? It kind of goes into that passive aggressive stuff. Disrespect your superiors. They're not as good as you anyway, right? Tip number 25, hate the process. When you come into work, it is very important to remember that cooking is a chore and you're only doing it to get a paycheck. It's better if you just don't find any enjoyment or any fulfillment in it at all. When you come into work, only think about negative things. Don't think about any positive stuff going on. The more positive stuff you think is going on, the harder it's going to be to do these other tips. I don't know what kind of a world we're going to live in if we have cooks enjoying what they do and having a better and safer work environment. I do want your opinion on something. What kind of tips do you think will help make sure that people never grow in the industry? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know by a like if you did. Otherwise, you guys have an amazing day, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace. Tip number 12 is anytime there's a high pressure situation, panic. I can't. I'm trying so hard.